be live on Facebook, and let me just wait till I see it, the recording. What's up, guys? Just so you know, we'll record this live, and then I'm going to delete it just because YouTube is nuts. So share it, and you can find it in the membership later, but I'll have to delete this one, so you know it's going to be good. All right, here we go. Now let me just record. We're off to the races. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. As you know, we are facing extreme censorship alongside many other truth seekers out there. If you want to support the show, please go over to mattbelair.com and sign up for the email list. Become a member for exclusive and censorship-free content by donation or for free. And most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is the author of the new explosive book, Cold Comfort: One Man's Struggle to Stop the Illegal Marketing of Powerful Opioid Drugs and Save Lives. Having worked as a top pharmaceutical sales manager for 24 years, he did not intend to become a whistleblower, nor did he fully understand what he was getting himself into when he encouraged his company to stop illegally marketing off-label use of prescription drugs. He ended up losing his job, getting blackballed by the industry, becoming homeless after going through $1 million in assets and savings, and fearing all of his sacrifices and efforts would lead to nothing being done to the company that contributed to our nation's deadly opioid overdose epidemic. Welcome to the show, Bruce Boyce.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. We're having a nice little discussion before the show, and I started to, I read through like a little bit of what the book was about and your story, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm excited just to hear it all. And I'm also really grateful for you sharing this message, because this is really what's going on in the world right now. And people have no idea how dangerous pharmaceutical drugs can be. We just accept that these are good for us. We go to the doctor, they prescribe a pill. We don't question it. We're taught not to question anything, but we don't really look at these things. I did an amazing podcast with Kelly Brogan, who speaks a lot about this, who was a doctor in the pharmaceutical industry. So, but your story is very incredible. So why don't we just start at the beginning? Like, why did you want to write the book, or at the beginning of your story, wherever you feel like we should start?
How about we start when I decided I was going to leave the company because they were promoting their products off-label. Now, on-label is permissible by the government for a doctor to write, which saves a lot of lives sometimes. So if you have a drug that is indicated for something, a medical condition, and let's say that Dr. A prescribes that drug for another medical condition, but not what's indicated, but that's legal in the sense he's trying to help a patient. What's illegal is for the pharmaceutical company to wind up promoting their drug off-label. That's the illegal part. And what this company was doing was promoting a fentanyl product off-label. That is really dangerous. And so that's where I decided I was going to stay in the company and I was going to leave. And a nurse in one of the offices called me while I was on vacation when I was putting my resume together and said, you could do something about this. And I go, well, yeah, I could, but who would I contact? And she goes, well, let me take care of that. And I said, well, go ahead, you take care of that. And if something comes out of it, I'll follow up. And I just sort of said that to just sort of, I was going out to dinner. I really didn't want to talk to her on vacation. And lo and behold, her sister was FBI. And so
Wow.
Her sister.
You didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. So her sister then got a hold of OCI, which is Office of Criminal Investigation. So those are federal agents, just like an FBI agent is. Wear the gold badge, the gun, the whole thing. So the OCI agents for the FDA got a hold of me, and I turned over information, and that's when they asked me to wear a wire. And that's how the cases started.
Holy smokes, that's terrifying. Okay, well, it's, you decide to wear this wire. How long did you do it for? Were you terrified, and were you worried about the consequences of potentially getting caught?
I was, and all that. I was scared about it. I was worried about not just for me, but I was worried about my kids, and I was worried about, and really at that point, I really didn't even know what a whistleblower was. All I knew was that what I was trying to do was that I was thinking, okay, I'm going to save my job. I'm going to save the company because what they're doing is illegal. And so this is what I'm going to do. And that way I'll keep my job. And so I was just going, okay, if I need to wear a wire, I'll wear the wire. And so I did not expect that and maybe I was really naive in that sense, but I really didn't expect that it was the company wide. And as I was working with the agents, I was doing more investigative work with the agents. And what occurred, I found out that I thought it was a manager that was going rogue, and it wasn't that at all. It was the entire company that was bad. And so with that, they asked me to wear the wire. And then when I wore the wire, that's when I got a lot of good information about what they were doing and how they were doing it. But it was pretty scary stuff to say, yeah, you're going to wear a wire. And wearing the wire for a federal agent, because then I became an undercover informant. I wasn't a whistleblower. Okay, so it was almost 2 years to put the case together.
Holy smokes! So you're ready to hand in your resignation,
Right.
and then you end up staying there for 2 years. So I would think emotionally or mentally, you realize something's wrong, obviously, that you don't agree with, and now
Right.
you're having to kind of pretend that that's not bothering you and converse and change your tune a little bit.
Yeah, it was like the agents would go, okay, we want you to increase your sales. I go, it's off label, it's dangerous. That puts everybody else at risk. Remember, I came to you about this? No, we want you to, because we need more information from them. So I go, well, because I'm not going to do off label, my sales are bad. Well, you're going to get fired. Yeah, I think that's probably what's going to happen. And they go, oh, we'll do a buy. We'll do a buy, and it'll look like your zip codes will be great because we'll do this buy. So they were going to manipulate the wholesalers and the products so that they would look like that I was selling the drug, and I wasn't. So that I would stay on to wear wires so that I could get all the information, the evidence for the cases, right? And lo and behold, we didn't have to do that because the company caught on. After I wore the wire to a national meeting, they caught on, and 3 or 4 months after that, I was let go. So I was gone, and I still wore the wire after I wasn't with the company anymore. So they'd say, hey, look, you're going to contact this rep. You're going to contact this manager. Would you wear the wire for that? Okay, I'll wear the wire for that. So in those kind of conversations, you speak into the collar right here.
Right. Wow. Okay. So, well, I guess walk me through it from there. Like, yeah, how does the storyline go from there? Do you stay in the industry for a while? Like, when does it come to the point where you're
It was probably around another 6 months. I stayed in the industry, and then I tried to get into the industry. And then what happened, I actually had a job with a company in San Diego. And the company was, I was going to be the director of training. And I had the job. My suitcases were packed. Not only were my suitcases packed, I had a separate suitcase for the Arizona national meeting with this company that I'd be introduced as the national trainer. In walked somebody from HR, talked to the VP that I was being hired by. The VP turned around and looked at me, and he said, you are a son of a bitch. You work for the feds. And with that, I was escorted out of the building. And that's when I was blackballed from the industry.
right? Okay. So you can't get a job. And at this point, what are the feds doing? Like telling you to keep trying to get work, or are they compensating you in any way?
They're just that. And that's the other part about it. That's why I did journaling for years. I did journaling for like 15 years. And the reason why is because not only could I not trust the company, I couldn't trust the feds, and I couldn't trust some of the Justice Department and what they were doing, because they would, look, they're going to use me to get at the company, right? But it's not necessarily to your advantage, okay? A key temp case or a false claims case, which is what this is, they're usually 10% are successful. Your success rating is below 10%. So once you cross that line and do that, you're probably not going into back in the industry, and you're probably going to have to pick up some other vocation, but you're also not going to make any money from any reward from the government, most likely. So the chances of me surviving was pretty slim to none. Like you'd mentioned in the intro, I'd gone through $1 million plus as net worth. And I was living with my brother, and I was pretty much homeless, had no vehicle, had a bicycle to go to Kinko's to get on to do my emails. And I borrowed the money for the emails from my brother so I could keep in touch with all my emails and my contacts. It was pretty devastating. It was pretty devastating. And, Matthew, I still don't feel like I'm part of society still. That's how bad. And that's been decades now.
Holy smokes. Okay. So what's the time frame between having the money and not being able to get jobs to blowing through it? Did you do that in a year? Or was that like a 5-year thing?
Well, it was probably like a year or two. And part of the reason with that is that, I was making, I don't know, and I'll just say this for your audience, I was probably making around $350,000 a year as an area manager. And I was doing really well. I was, doing exceptionally well. If I would have stayed in the industry and been promoted from that period on, I would have made a lot more money than I recovered in the settlements of the cases. So when people say, well, you're a whistleblower because you make all this money from it, that's not what occurs. That's not why you do it. You don't become a whistleblower. Most whistleblowers do not step up for money or fame. They do it because something is wrong and somebody's going to get hurt from it. That's why they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine how challenging that would be, because you've got the FBI and the government. And from what I've looked at, as far as FBI and CIA and all the stuff I'm looking at in the world, like even in there might be some sort of corruption possible, right? There might be, somebody at the top of something that doesn't want, the information to get out, and you don't know where that line is, right? So when you were going through this, what was your experience? Do you think all pharmaceutical companies are a little bit shady in the sense of profits? Would you say most? Would you say some?
I think there are companies that in the pharmaceutical industry that do great work, and there are people that are striving to make discoveries. In the sort of the middle of the road, there are companies that make money for profit, and that makes sense in our industry, our society, but they make just Me Too drugs. Me Too drugs only perpetuates what they had before and moving patients over to something that's patent free, and they make more money from it rather than going to generic. So in that sense, they're okay, but they're not doing a service to society per se, and they're just making money. Then there's this smaller group that's rogue, that operate, if I can say it, as this company at this time were completely illegal in what they were doing. And they didn't care. They didn't care who died. They didn't care. It was just about greed. Okay. And those people, our citizens, our society needs to pay attention to and protect the citizens and the innocent people involved. They get hurt from that. And we need to speak up with that. So I'm glad that the nurse called me and said, hey, you can do something about that. And I'm glad that I said, yes, I would. But it's a long journey. It is not for the faint of heart. And you do wind up losing most things at that time. But then the other side, Matthew, is that it's a wonderful transformation as an individual. You find out who you are, you find out how strong you can be, you really understand what's important in life. And so there's a wonderful, I would have never gone through that if I didn't step up and do that and go through the hardships. And so there's a great lessons there about, doing for others and working through really hard times and finding solutions for that.
Well, yeah, I can appreciate all that. And when I think about it, it's this battle for profit, right? As a sales manager, you
Right.
are there to make sales.
Right.
Ideally, the product you're selling is helping individuals.
Right.
The challenge is when it's a pharmaceutical and there might be side effects, or they might, only need to be on for a month or 2 months. Well, the best model for money is recurring revenue. So you
Right.
keep them on. So there might be slightly addictive. There might be these different things that might not be of the best interest. And the average person might not know how addictive they are. They might not have the support to get them off. And this is a wide variety. It's a massive, massive industry. So the challenge is, how is it regulated, and what are doctors actually doing? What is that? Some people, if they go to one end, they say, doctors are glorified pharmaceutical pushers, right? But a lot of the doctors that I know are fantastic people, but we also know that if you look at the Flexner report of 1910, that's when Rockefeller and Carnegie essentially hijacked modern medicine and said anything that was homeopathic is quackery. Meanwhile, they were giving mercury to people and poisoning them. And so when we want to find real solutions, real health, the body 9 times out of 10 can do that with proper medicine. And there is a place for modern medicine for sure when you need a variety of things. So how do we bridge that gap from what you've seen, where we say, hey, we want to have this product that's going to help solve the solution, but it can't be sales driven to the point where you're giving it to people that don't need it, or the regulations, or like, what did you see in the industry that can address my kind of rant here?
Well, I think one of the things is what's important is that what are we doing with the FDA? Okay. And the reason why I say that, and let me start with that, and then I'll bring to your question that you have. The reason I had a second case is because the company did the Me Too thing again. That's why I mentioned the Me Too. They went from one fentanyl product to another fentanyl product. Now, why would this company, being investigated by the feds, be allowed by the FDA to have a new drug that's a fentanyl product to be back on the market again? Like, they already are being investigated for this one fentanyl product, but now they're going to change it, modify it, and they're going to get it through the FDA, and the FDA approves it. And so where are we at now? We're right back in the same position, filing another case for fraud against this company because they're selling off-label another fentanyl product because they didn't give a damn. They were going to push the drug for greed. Now, why did the FDA approve that? What in the world are we doing with the FDA that would approve that? And what I'm saying to you is that there are solutions, and there's simpler solutions. We as a group of people in society need to focus and need to look for those. And when you say, the difference between homeopathic and pharmaceutical and all that, what works? What's the question? What's the truth of in the query is what works? How are we getting to be better? Okay, and here's a great example. Narcan is used for overdose of opioids, right? And now what they see is 5 to 7 doses per patient in an overdose. Because what is Narcan used for? Heroin overdose. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin. So obviously it's not effective. They're going to use more. Pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money on Narcan, aren't they? So what comes up with this is Dr. Guberman out of New Jersey has this naltrexone, which is different. It's a non-narcotic. He gets it for pennies on the dollar, makes an aerosol. He gives it free to patients that need that kind of support and also that kind of care. That kind of stuff right there is what we need to do. Is instead of looking for, there's got to be a drug to solve this. There's got to be, something, better living through chemistry is not necessarily better living. And so there's got to be a balance, and we got to find what the simple solutions and the truth is to all this. And that's the quest, right? That is the quest.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the challenge comes back to money. I had Dr. Diva Nagula on, and he's now a doctor who had cancer. He's a medical doctor, and then he went through that process. And the first person he went through said, "You must have chemo, right, in order to heal yourself." And then he realized that doctor had a vested interest in the chemotherapy. There's a financial interest, and so if these doctors in lab coats, which people are conditioned to trust, right? Same with vaccines. And you go down that rabbit hole, you can look at Del Bigtree's work. You can look at Vax. You can look at all these different things. I had no idea about any of this until March, the coronavirus stuff. But if you look at that history, you look at Robert Kennedy Jr.'s work, who is now deleted from Instagram, and you watch him debate somebody for vaccines. Well, guess what? One person is giving a lot more information. One seems a lot more true, and one is a lot more knowledgeable. It can pick holes of the propaganda, but one of them comes with massive financial interest. And so how do we keep the integrity of medicine when there's a financial interest, just like with the Corona thing? And I can't say too much because get deleted, but we'll go over to the membership. So make sure you're over there. But they were compensating hospitals if it was a COVID death. Well, if you're going to get $10,000 if you label it, and then you get another bunch if you use a ventilator, well, you're going to have now incentive when it might not be in that individual's best interest. And so you don't even want to put that carrot there, because when people, you start to calculate in your mind, you go, wow, shoot, if I can pop off 10 of these sales a week, that's going to get me to an extra 100K a year, right? Then people's integrity starts to erode. And so do you see any solutions for this idea to make sure the right medicine is in the right hands and with the right testing? Because it seems that when I peeled back the layer, the corruption seems to go to the top. You know what I mean? It's always this pyramid. Like, I worked in car sales, and lots of car salesmen are great people. Lots of car dealerships are great people. And some of them, when they're really focused on profit, can be their perspective of how to do things is different than making sure you get the right car at the right price, at the right value. You know what I mean? They're like, how do I get them in the car that I'm going to make the most amount of money from? And guess what? On the back end, the bank makes a lot of money. So then the whole banking thing, you keep going up, but it's always a pyramid, right? And so you could have integrity in the salespeople, then the integrity can erode as you go up. But the problem is they're the one giving the orders. And so what do you think of all that?
And you have to go back to the same issue of truth, right? You have to ask the questions. And if you're not willing to ask the questions, then you just accept the answers. And so you have to be able to ask the questions and dig. And eventually what happens is that people can't hide all those questions and answers. And eventually you do find the information that's truthful. And that's where what I've found out through what I've done is that you just have to be dogged. And you just cannot give up. You have to be persistent, and you cannot give up. And eventually you'll succeed with that. And so, but a lot of people aren't built that way, right? They're not. And that's why people like you and I doing a podcast that gets information out is really helpful. There are some people that are going to listen to what I say and don't agree with that, but I can't help if they don't agree with it, because it's what I experienced and what I went through. And I went through 2 cases. I went through all this that was going on, and I was up against militant defendants. And do you know what I mean by that? I mean that you better hold on to your butt because they're not just going to defend the company, they're going to come after you. And so you have to weather all that, and you still have to ask the questions. You have to be strong enough to say, hey, you didn't give me the answer that I was asking. And so I'm going to come back at you again. What about this? And if you approach it also in different angles, like you may ask one doctor one thing, and you may ask the question differently in another, but you're still going to come up with that answer that you're looking for. And so you have to be persistent, you have to be dogged, and you just can't give up on it.
Yeah, I agree. And we were also talking before the show about the real danger. Brandy Vaughn recently died mysteriously, and she had a post that I had read, and I didn't follow her work. It was something that I came along during this whole thing, and she basically has a Facebook post that says, my house is Fort Knox. If I die mysteriously, you know why. And she's been blowing the whistle. It's a very dangerous thing. I have another friend, Dr. Bear Lando, who's been on the podcast a lot of time. People would come to him at the end of the road with cancer. They would have, pharmaceutical or no, allopathic traditional medicine had no remedy. The same with many other people I know. So they say, okay, well, they go to Dr. Bear, and Dr. Bear would have success. Well, he was having such great success in the 90s near California. One of his friends, they would go back and forth for treatments and things. And he kept saying, hey, Bear, like, we're curing people of cancer. And he's like, don't say that. You can't say that. Don't say that to anyone. You need to frame it another way. And so he didn't stop. And Bear said that him and his whole family got murdered. And that's like a real life story that I've heard. Many natural doctors, many people of the quote unquote cure are dying. And so a lot of people call it the sick care system. Well, if you're selling a product around health, whether it's a pharmaceutical, a vaccine, or a widget, and it works the first time, there's not a lot of money or profit in it. Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so then it goes to the top of this kind of controlling mechanism. And if you look now and you follow the money tree of the vaccines that are out there, it's super easy to figure out. You look at the very top, they stand to benefit, a great amount. Like if you had 7 billion customers, right? That's how it's easy. Okay. Even if you have no risk, you have 7 billion customers, and guess what? It's multiple times a year now. And if you don't comply, here's a little badge that everybody gets. You don't get to shop. Is like, okay, like where's the common sense in this? That has nothing at all to do with health. So right now we're in this courageous thing where we need to look at things and stand up. In my own research, just sharing what I've shared, I've been attacked, ostracized, channel deleted, all these different things for just sharing the actual truth. And so maybe you can speak a little bit about that, but also what it took to stand up and what you got on the other side, because I feel like honestly right now it's like this erosion of souls, that when we see something wrong and we do nothing and we're complicit in it, we're selling our soul a little bit. If whether you're a nurse or a doctor or a police officer and anybody. My friend, Dr. Pierre Theriot, is a doctor in Quebec for 38 years. And he recently gave up his license willingly to speak out, because this is so wrong what they're doing. They're manipulating. He's been treating people in the small area and around, doing great work for so long. He's like, this is so corrupt and so evil. And they're passing it down to him. And from the top of Canada, which answers to the unelected WHO, which you just need to look at those people and do your own research and realize maybe it's not for your best interest, and maybe you should think for yourself. And so how do we get to that space where we have that knowledge or courage? Because it's terrifying, especially when the mob is getting dangerous. They're getting aggressive, and it's not what you went through, but it's still scary.
Right. One of the things that's important, I think, if you look at like critical management, when you're in a crisis, so critical crisis management, one of the issues is time. So if you give yourself time, things tend to help that crisis because of the time element. In anything that you're trying to dig up with information, what's going to happen is that time will help uncover what the truth is. So as much as we want it now, and we want to find out now and resolve some of these big issues in our society, right? What does play out is that the truth does come out in that time period. And so you have to pay it. A lot of times people don't pay attention to those pathways, those lights that are shown. They don't pay attention to, they wind up looking at stuff and they go, oh, it's got to be this. And it has nothing to do with that. Okay. A good example is that you could wind up having a second case, but if the Justice Department isn't interested in it, they drop you. So over time, you have to decide that you're going to just keep going with that and you keep digging. Now, it may be something gets picked up later, and I've had that experience by other state attorneys. But the point is that it may not be the right time for that, but eventually you keep being persistent, like I said, and don't give up. What occurs is that you wind up discovering something that maybe 2 years ago you wouldn't have been able to discover because it wasn't ready for that or whatever the reason. And then all of a sudden what occurs is that you've got that extra bit of time and you wind up coming back over the information that you need, and it really appears in a different way. And one of those is this spray that's used in a long term rather than short term on Narcan with opioid patients as far as overdose patients. So those are some of the things that occurred because this product hadn't been used. It had been used unsuccessfully by mouth and by injection and never been used in spray before. So you just keep at it until something or someone discovers something, and then off you're running, and you just got to keep at it. That's what I think it is.
And so, well, what would you suggest for somebody who might be in a, I guess for lack of a better word, we'll call it a whistleblower situation? Project Veritas does a lot of work with that. And I think it's just calling out corruption. And I think that so many people just go along, even though they notice something that isn't good. And so we need to stop doing that. There's I took law and security, which was fascinating. And they said that if you see a crime or somebody being assaulted, if it's one person, they'll normally do something. But if it's 10 or a crowd of people, they'll all just watch. There's this weird group psychology thing that goes on. And so unfortunately, a lot of our industries and corporations become predatory for profit because that's how they're designed by nature. They're not designed for the proper use of sustainability or integrity, right? It's like, oh, well, this will make us, we need more and more and more because of inflation or whatever. We're not, you start to erode some values and cut some corners. And so that's really the challenge, I feel like, in any industry, especially when it comes to your health. And now we're seeing it with big tech because, we've never seen the weaponization of big tech before, but now we're in it.
Right. I think one of the things too for your audience is that if you're planning on doing something like that, first of all, there are good lawyers, and they also will fight the good fight with you. You just got to find those, and they're usually in a small finite group, and they're recommended. Because the first thing then is to be able to get a hold of somebody that protects your rights. So if you're going to do that, make sure you get somebody that protects your rights. The second thing is that make sure you pay attention to your financial position. In other words, if you're in a company and you're going to be a whistleblower, then you need to get the information and then move to another company before all hell breaks loose, because it will if you're still there, so that you have a job and you protect your assets. So those, and probably the third one is that, and this may be the move up to number one, is that you need to talk to your family, and if the kids are old enough, to talk to your kids to let them know what you're going to do. And is it okay with the family? And is it okay with your spouse? Because that's a big thing to put on everybody else. I was single at the time when I did it, but my kids were young adults and they were in college at the time. And so, but I still then went to my kids and said, hey, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna be an undercover informant. Are you okay with that? And so I think those are some of the things. If you're gonna go down that path, by all means, more people should. I think you're correct in saying, rather than just not paying it, if somebody gets knifed or robbed at the ATM, stand up for that. I think that you should stand up for that. But if you're going to do that, make sure you protect yourself as well.
Well, very practical insights from a man who's kind of gone through it. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, you know, you were kind of on the side before in sales, and in sales, it's about profit, right? Profit is
Right.
about lifestyles and luxuries and all these different things. Then you lose everything, right? If you have nothing, let's say you're poor, right? And you're striving, and then you're going on Instagram, you're finding hustle 9,000,
Yeah.
10X this, get into sales, hustle day and night, get the paper, as they say, and you drive the cool cars and all that. And then, so you did that, right?
Yeah.
Not as balling as Floyd Mayweather, but you did all right.
Yeah.
And right. But then you had this experience, and you decide to engage in something that is dangerous and challenging, but needs to be said and done. And you do that. And now you're, like you said, you're not fully in the world, because you were in kind of you learn about the FBI and how that whole system works, and the pharma and all that works. And so you're not exactly placed back in the world. What would you say to an individual that's striving for, like, I don't know, money or success or whatever? Like, what did you learn from this experience of going through that amazing and very challenging transition?
Well, first of all, let's define success, right? What is success to you? And what I thought success was that made me happy was material. And what I realized is that that's not what made me happy. What made me happy was stepping up and trying to help people that were innocent in the situation, that I felt good about me being able to step forward to help all those individuals. Now that to me is success. So in the beginning of that career in pharmaceuticals, being a manager, being successful, making a lot of money, and getting all the awards and all that, and President's Club, and I did all that. To me, that was success. And what I realized is that that's not what made me tick. That's not what made me happy. What made me happy was something bigger than that, and working towards those goals. And when I took that challenge in life, I had to lose. I didn't realize I was going to lose everything. And so I thought I could like give the information to the FBI and the OCI, and I was going, hey, are you good with that? I'm good with that, right? And I could walk away and then just be a manager someplace else again, right? And that's not what happens. Okay, you hit bottom hard. Okay, but in doing that, there was this huge benefit of me, one, struggling, reinventing myself, finding who I am, realizing how strong my constitution is, and really finding out that how adaptable I am, and understanding law and understanding pharmaceuticals, and being able to put all those things together. And in an abstract way, I was good at different abstract ideas to put them together to be useful. And so with all that was going on, what happened was that I discovered this other side of me that is literally is invaluable. I can't put a price on that. And that's the cool thing that happened out of everything. Because the money I made from the settlement, I would have made more money staying in the pharmaceutical industry. So you don't do it for the money. You don't make it for the money. You do it for the right reasons. Is why you're doing it. But the benefit from doing it for the right reasons is that you get that inner glow that you feel, hey, that you can't take that away from me. What I did was really a good thing. And that will last me the rest of my life.
Well, I feel like that's a really just beautiful and powerful story. And what I want to ask in a direct way too, because I feel like a lot of people are listening to this, I'm going to kind of ask it in two different ways. You know, having lived through that success of say 300 or 400 grand or whatever it is, you know, financial success, right? And prosperity.
Right.
And you had that, you
Right.
went to the other side and now you didn't. Now, if you were, let's say, just really basic, like a one bedroom apartment and you were doing something and you didn't have a lot of money, would you still think that it's worth it? Can you look at yourself and say, yeah, I would still make that choice knowing that this was the path because of
Oh, I'd
what
do
you
it
got on
again.
the other side?
Flat out do it again. Without hesitation. I'd do it again. Because what I learned about myself and all that people don't know about, I mean, they read the book, but all this that we're going into in depth, people don't know that I struggled mightily with depression, that, you know, I do mention that in the book, but net worth was over $1 million prior to working with the government. And once I got blackballed and I lost everything, you know, and it's pretty easy for you to do, especially if you're making that kind of money, because your monthly is pretty high because you're handling college and you're handling different houses and different cars. And then when you go to zero, you know, it's pretty humbling, right? And, you know, and I think one of the things I had two friends that, and I mentioned these two in the book, that they ran a carny business. So I don't know if you know what a carny business is. It's carnival. So they put a tent up and they cook hamburgers and they sell the hamburgers. Okay. And so they offered me a job at $10 an hour cash. And that's what I survived on. Now they were 12-hour, 14-hour days on my feet and flipping burgers in a hot sun, 90 degrees and over a grill. But you know, when you do that hard labor and when you do that and it's honest and it's really difficult, you get to look at yourself pretty hard about where you're going and what you're doing. And so that kind of experience, like I said, that was invaluable. Now, some people wouldn't look at it that way, but for me, it was a wonderful experience for me that I grew. You know, people talk about growth as an individual. And that's a tremendous growth. Whether it was successful or not, or whether the cases were successful or not, to look at yourself and say, hey, I was able to do that and I went through that. That's a big deal. That's Matthew, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the reason why I wanted to ask again is because it's definitely something that I believe and I've seen. Yeah, I've interviewed 450 people now and many people on the other side. And when I say the other side, very often it's creating your life by default, just kind of going for what culture and community and what you think is important, right? What other people have decided, what the television told you was important, what success is, because you didn't define it on your own terms. And they'll either get there and it's not what they thought it was, or they'll crash, or they'll have like a health problem because they sacrificed everything else to get this, you know, golden calf or whatever. And
Right.
they realize, oh, I was looking in the wrong direction. You know, this was a mistake. And so the follow-up question that I want to ask, and because you answered that exactly how I had imagined and hoped, because it's just true. I've had enough. I've experienced it in my own life. I've heard many other people, and you can hear there's this sense of right and wrong, and we're in our own integrity. We're just doing the thing that we know has integrity at that time. It's all we know. It's not easy, and we get to the point of humility, and it doesn't have to be a hard thing that gets us there. We can choose that right off the bat and lead in that direction, or sometimes
Not
life.
many people do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They go and but this is how we're kind of bred, right? We go,
Right.
we go through high school and we're looking at the famous people and we're attracted to the famous people. And then
Right.
all the music videos have cars and money. And how do you get that? Right. Right. They're not teaching about values, lifestyle, what's important, what's going to make you fulfilled, what's going to really uplift you. And so the follow-up question I want to ask is, this has been my mindset and teaching for a long time. You know, I did the peak performance thing. for really high level athletes. And I thought that was important. What I'm noticing and feel like is the most important thing that we can do as individuals is to know what our life purpose is, or by direction, being able to follow our own intuition between what's meaningful by our own definition, because that will always be in integrity with ourselves, and it's always cooperative with the environment. But the success of the monetary gain might not be there, right? It might not be
Correct.
$300,000 a year pharmaceutical rep. It
Right.
might not, if I were in cars, I'd be making 50 grand a month. I don't know what that was at five.
And let me just say this to you. And I don't mean to diss that by other people. By all means, if you make millions a year, God love you, go for it. Okay. To me, that's hollow. If you don't have the other in your life, it's hollow. And then what I mean by what you're talking about is being centered, know who you are, where you want to go, what you want to do. Like, I feel today I can accomplish anything and nothing's really going to throw me. And that's because of what I went through. And so when you have that, I didn't have that before. I didn't have that. I was going along like what you talked about. You see it on television and, hey, I'm going to do this, or I want that, or I'm going to get that house, or, on and on and on. You're driven by all those other things in your life. And that's to me. Now I'm a little different than I was. I don't put up with bullshit. Okay. I wind up, I'm a little harder in my questions with people. I'm not a skeptic in that sense. I tried not to be cynical, okay, with what I went through. I'm a positive person, and I try to keep that. But the other side of me now is that I think I can handle most things now. I don't get flustered with a lot of things, and I'm not scared off a lot with things. So I think that kind of girth that you have about yourself, that gravitas that you have, right? That now you've got, that's invaluable, Matthew. That's invaluable. And what I went through and how that came about, I didn't expect that, right? Obviously you don't expect that, but I'm sure you get other stories like that.
Yeah, and it's great because you didn't realize that you're letting go of all that money. You're like, okay, I'm gonna transition over here. You're like, oh crap, you know what I mean? There that goes, and then you kind of learn it the hard way. Like, oh no, I didn't see this coming, and it's amazing to hear that from your words, because it can be hollow. Like, we're not saying that money is it's not bad. Money is great. It's just it's doing it in the wrong order, right? And so that's kind of my suggestion. And when I'm teaching, and what I feel is most important, figure
Right.
out what your values are, who you are, what you enjoy, what your curiosities are, what's
Right.
most meaningful to you. What would
Yes.
you do if you're retired already and financially secure? How do you want
Right.
to help people?
Right.
Put that first, and then intend to create abundance from that, because oftentimes people can create incredible abundance from that. But when we're going abundance first and money first, which is not all bad, we need that to survive. There's this middle ground where we get, but when we just go just profit, we're then saying all the stuff that we value, that we didn't question, all the stuff that's our most integrity, how we would develop our skills, what kind of relationships we want. We're saying that's not as important. And so when you flip this, right? And this is what I kind of wanted to ask, which is the follow-up question. What would you recommend to, I don't know if you have daughters or sons, or, how do you recommend a young person or somebody who's working a 9 to 5 or whatever to guide their life? Is there any kind of principles or shifts that you'd say, okay, I'm in this thing, and like, how would I guide my life a little bit differently now I've gone through this process?
Well, I think especially with my kids, and my kids are a little older now, and they're not kids now, they're young adults. But one of the things, they went through this with me. When I was doing the 60 Minute stuff and I was with CBS and we were filming, my kids were in the shoots. And, from my daughter, my youngest daughter, she started to cry. And I said, and the producer goes, hey, Meredith, why are you crying? Dad, that year, that when you had nothing, you were homeless, I lived with you and I slept in a chair. And I go, you what? I said, you don't remember I slept in the chair for a year. Now, that takes you back a little bit, okay? And I think when they wound up living with me and we went through that, they see that. So for them, you know, I made this transition from this material stuff and going over here and learning about myself and all that. They saw that. They lived that. Okay. So, you know, we talk about the idea is the most important. The money follows.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really incredible about your daughter. That's very humbling.
It
And
is.
the other thing I was thinking with a kid, they just want your attention. They just want your time. And so when I had my daughter, I had to reevaluate everything. And one of the things I'm putting now, because I don't get to spend all day with her, I'm working really hard. And we're also in a time of crisis in the planet. So I think it's
Right.
necessary in transition. And so, but I'm envisioning that. I know that that's my number one thing, that I need to have enough time with her as much as I can, as much as I want. And so if I'm noticing that I'm not having enough, so I have checks of how I can see her in the morning, right? We can play around and do different things and we get to hang out at night. But if there's a few times we're not, I'm making sure that that's there, because that's the most important thing. I'm valuing that. And so when you are sitting there in that one bedroom apartment, from your son or daughter's perspective, if you get all day with dad, they're going to be happy. They're going to want your attention. And that can be even a beautiful thing if we, engage in that. And I feel like that's just a simple thing that people, if they really thought about, would be able to change their lives, because so often everything is about the more money, because then you get the freedom, quote unquote. But that's not always true. A lot of the time you work that extra time to get that extra money. Well, just leave the car that you have as the car you have. Just leave that luxury of the thing that you probably don't need. Like, just leave that out so you can actually reassess, right? If you live simply, if your expenses are low, it's funny because the abundance is fine and it grows. And I've seen amazing stories of people I've coached in my own life and other people where abundance is there, but the integrity has to be there first. It's the right thing there first, and the universe responds
I
to
think so.
support that, and it's wonderful. And so I think
I totally
often, if
agree with that.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And so you know if you just always put that money amount or that thing, you can kind of be missing the beauty along the way. And
Right.
if you just live a bit simpler, right? Like, the amount of the watch you have or something like that. And I was actually going to ask you as a fun question, what's either the stupidest thing that you bought, or the thing that you're like, oh, I'm going to get a Rolex or whatever, or like the fanciest thing that you bought where you're like, and maybe even the reason behind it, like, did you get like a Rolex or something and like kind of flash it? I'll tell you one of my stupid stories first to give you an idea of the question. I worked in cars, and I do love cars. I would love a nice car. I like Audi RS7. Like, I just love them. I hope I can one day have the most ballin' Jay Leno garage. You know what I mean? I rent it. I don't care. I just want to drive them. Want to drive a car around a racetrack. I want everything.
Right.
But I'm not going to sacrifice the stuff. If I get it, it's a wicked bonus, and I'll be super grateful.
Right.
But I remember driving this Ferrari from my boss, right? And I drove that thing fast, and it was a ton of fun. But I would always drive it in front of the bar. And I was young, and like, I was in my 20s, and because I'd like want people to look. I'm like, yeah, I'm in a Ferrari. It's so cool. And you think like the girls are going to pay attention. No girls paid attention. It was only the guys talking about the car. Like, get out of here. It's just like, this is supposed to be cool. And this is supposed to make me feel good. This is supposed to, you know what I mean? I'm in this thing that means something. And, you're by yourself in the Ferrari, and this one had no AC, so I was hot and I was hot and uncomfortable. But it was a
Yeah.
ton of fun. You know what I mean? So it didn't
Yeah.
equate to the thing that I thought it would.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's and through that whole time frame that I went through, there was a number of things that, but I got to after I went through all that, there was very little that I did. If I would spend money, it was on friends. If I'd spend money, it was on family, and it was and in spending it, it was time with them. Most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Well, do you have one of those stories? Did you buy something silly and think it was going to do something, or just? What about a boat? Were you a boat? I hope.
tell you a story. I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
I'll tell you a story. When I got when there was settlement occurred on the first case, it was $425 million. And so the whistleblowers split up about $57 million. And the person that helped me, that I can't name, that was in the company, loved vehicles just like you, loved cars just like you. And so I said, after it was all over, I'm not going to bribe him right before the case was over. But it was the issue that I knew he loved cars. And I called him up and I said, hey, what can I do for you? The case is over. This is the settlement. I know you weren't going to take any money. You weren't going to do it for taking any money. And there were other issues. There were other reasons why he couldn't do anything or be part of the case, right? He couldn't be openly part of the case as a defendant. So he said, man, I really like an SL 550 Mercedes. I go, why? Why that? And he goes, our CEO, that we were part of the same company, that's what he drove. And I said, okay, I'll get you one of those. He goes, holy crap. He said, they're $125,000. And I said, no, I said, seriously, I'll get one, I'll buy it, and I'll pay the taxes, and I'll send it to you. And so his wife, if he sees this video, he's going to know, his wife gave him crap that Bruce would never follow through, that would never happen. So the settlement happened like in September, and this is Thanksgiving, and his in-laws are in his house, and the wife, mom and dad are giving this guy crap for, you shouldn't trust him, shouldn't give him the information, he's never going to follow up. And what pulls up in their driveway with a blue bow around a black Mercedes on Thanksgiving Day with his relatives there? He said to me, it was the car was great, but to do it on that day when all of them were there that gave him crap was the best ever. He said it was like I scored 100 touchdowns in football. It was the best thing ever. So that was sort of a funny story.
That's beautiful, and I love that, and I love how your story goes to the family and contributing to other people. It's one of the things I definitely learned from my time with David Lone Bear. One of my Native American teachers was, he would say, do 3 kind acts a day. And it's been the best spiritual teaching I've ever heard or know about. He said, he's a very interesting guy in a lot of different ways. And I was like, that's the best thing I've ever heard. And it's always just about the action. You know what I mean? And it doesn't need to be, it's amazing that it's the car and that's what he wants. But now that's what, you can do for others. And now, and I'll let you attest to this. It doesn't need to be the value. It's the time, or it's the gift, or it's the thought, or it's the thing. And it's just those little ripples that really, it shifts your perspective. Cause I think that a lot of the time it's just what we can get. And when you're crumbled down to, nothing, and you go through the humility and you go through the stress, and some people call it the dark night of the soul, you realize what's most important. And that's what I feel like humanity needs to shift towards. And that's what we're experiencing right now on a worldwide scale. We need integrity, massive integrity. You know what I mean? And we need truth, and we need to be working together. If you're the one who believes you're helping people, but you're shaming and you're attacking and you're doing all this stuff, if you're defending, that's a whole different thing. But if you're attacking because of what you believe and what you think, you're probably the aggressor. You're probably part of the problem. You know what I mean? So, yeah, well, that's really beautiful. And I think it's a great note to leave this on. But I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you wish that I had asked, or that you feel is important to cover before we close this? And just appreciate your time. And this has been a pleasure.
And we covered a lot. The only thing I'd reiterate with what we covered is that, you're not doing it for money. You're not doing what you do when you step out. You've got to look at all the thousands of people that maybe I helped. Hopefully that I helped when I did what I did with the government and stopping the company and their off-label promotion. People were dying. And you got to have that kind of view and when you mention do kind acts in your life, it's got to be in your heart. It's got to be in your heart that you want to do something that is a good thing and the right thing to do. And it's not like one day. You can't go to Sunday school and then be absolved of all the sins through Monday through Saturday, right? It's got to be something you practice every day, that this is who you are. So when you make that change in your life and you have that strength in your life, you use that strength in yourself to help other people, and you got to be able to do it every day. And that's the important thing. And that's what I try to do with not just launching the book, but in patient advocacy and addiction centers and what they're trying to accomplish to help people. And that's the important thing. And that's what everything for me has evolved to. And people, when they do that, will step into this really bright light that they'll feel good about themselves and feel good about what they try to do. And hopefully in society is better.
I love that. I think that's really well said. And, when you talk about the bright light, it's like, are you trying to help people? It feels good, right? And if you're trying to oppress people, it kind of, it feels bad. And the other thing that you said that I think is important is that it's that genuine action and intention. You can change your life immediately.
Matthew,
And then it's just being that way each day. You don't have to how am I going to save the world and do this and do all these big things and start a charity and
right.
a community and those are great,
Yeah.
all great ideas. And maybe your like huge vision is one of those, and that's wonderful. But it's that daily practice. I use the analogy of like, I'm going to yoga class and I'm going to meditate and get out of here, homeless guy. You know what I mean? We get it. This guy needs help with fixing his car. And you're like, that guy's in my way. Like, no, help those people along the way. And again, to go back to the David Lombard, that was the biggest teaching that I had, because I recognized how many opportunities each day I had to be kind. One of them was to just get people's names. And I never thought about that. But as I did, like when someone serves me their coffee, like a Tim Hortons in Canada or McDonald's in the States, or wherever you're going to get it, Dunkin' Donuts, I guess, or a lot of places, you get their name and it's just personal. And then you look at the masks now, we're getting even less personal. That's a whole nother thing, right? But you can't see a face. It's dehumanizing. But I can't believe I'm saying this before the masks. And even now I say, hi, what's your name? And it becomes like, oh, we are actually physically together right now and you can see me. It's so simple and stupid, but important.
It's very important.
And we're just so disconnected. And that's why we feel empty and we feel like our souls are hurting, because we're not connecting to people that are right in front of us. Yes. Right. And there's that opportunity each and every day, no matter where we are. And it might be a hard day. It might be a good day, might be something in between, but we have that opportunity each day to even brighten someone's day. And you don't even know how much that's going to help. When somebody does that kind thing, when someone just recognizes, someone just talks to you, you don't know how much that's going to help. And that becomes your natural way of being. And it feels a lot better than going around completely shut off, seeing what you can take. You're actually kind of like a predator species on the planet that way, right? Because you're looking, and like that's kind of satanic and Luciferian, because you're looking to take, you're not looking to contribute and support. It's two different worlds that you live in and proceed from, and one has a lot more powerful and truth and integrity. It feels a lot good, because if you're looking to usurp, you're kind of low, right? It's a dense feeling, and your mind shifts a bit, right? And it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't.
Fair enough.
The pretty crazy one.
Well, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you. I'm glad, that you went through and you were rewarded. You know what I mean? And you're never guaranteed. That's the whole point.
That's it.
You're never guaranteed. But like I asked, I believe you, and I know I've seen other people, because I have a buddy who's super successful, one of the most wealthy guys I know, and he goes, "You could take everything from me now." And before, because I built this, and he could build it again. And he's not joking. He would be happy. He's like, if I got my family, I'm happy. Right. He's like, this is it. He knows. And he built it the right way. He built success the right way. He's one of my mentors and one of my friends. And, he doesn't screw with his integrity. and he just provides value, and he literally would be okay because he knew how to do that. He knew how to provide value, to have integrity, and he just repeated that process.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think that's an important thing. So just thank you so much for coming on the show. And like I said, I'm glad you got the reward at the end of it, because it's never guaranteed, and you get to try again, right?
Yes.
If you miss, you can try again. Just
Yes.
stop giving up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if people want to check out the book, or they want to look more about your work, where should they go?
Um, they need to go to bruceboyce.com. And that's my website. And that will carry just not the book on Amazon, but that also carries like all the other things that I'm into, like, for example, the patient advocacy groups and the different videos of 60 Minutes and some of the other stuff I'm on. So bruceboyce.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Bruce. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the leap. You did it. You're on the other side, and let's continue. So thanks so much for coming on the show and for everything you do.
Hey, thank you. And we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. And for the listeners out there, censorship is real. Join the Academy, because I don't know if I'll get deleted from everywhere. It's the membership. You can do it for free or by donation, whatever the case is. Share the podcast, because it's not getting out any other way. So share it through Messenger and friends. And I appreciate you guys. So have an amazing day, and thank you for